This video is sponsored by Skillshare.
Hey guys, I'm Taufik. In this video, let's talk about views in SQL. Now, views are one of the most simplest of concepts that you can learn in SQL, but still views are very widely used in SQL. So in this video, I'm going to start by explaining you what a view is. I'm also going to explain you how SQL will process a view. We'll then look at how to create a view and how to modify a view. I'm then going to explain you what are the different advantages of using a view. That is, what is the main purpose of using a view in our projects. Finally, I'm going to talk about the updatable views. That is, how can you create a view which can be updated? That is, what are the different rules that you need to consider in order to make a view updatable? Hopefully, by the end of this video, you should be able to get complete understanding about what a view is and how to effectively use them. Now, before I can start, I would like to thank the sponsor of today's video, that is Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is an online learning community where you can find thousands of different classes related to almost any concept that you can think of. On Skillshare, you would find some fantastic classes related to productivity, photography, video creation, data science, data analytics, SQL, Python, and so many more. Now, personally, one of my favorite classes on Skillshare has to be the YouTube success class conducted by MKBHD. Now, MKBHD is one of the most reputed creators on YouTube, and his class on Skillshare has to be a masterpiece. In his class, he talks about everything that you need to know to make YouTube videos. He starts by talking about how to get video ideas and then how to script your videos and then how to shoot your videos, the different camera settings, the different lighting setup, and then how to engage your audience, and then also how to edit videos, some really good tips on how to edit videos, and also then finally how to grow your audience. I have definitely benefited from the class conducted by MKBHD on Skillshare, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who wants to make better YouTube videos. But of course, there are so many other fantastic classes on Skillshare that you can take as well. Now, the best part about Skillshare is that you can join Skillshare for free. So if you click on the link that I will be leaving in the description below, you will get 1 month free access to all the different classes that are available on Skillshare. So definitely check that out, and thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
Okay, so let's start by understanding what a view is. View is a database object which is created over an SQL query. Meaning, view will just represent the data that is returned by an SQL query. So, view does not store any data, but every time you call a view, it just executes the SQL query underlying it. So, we can basically say that view is similar to a table and can be treated as an virtual table. But the difference between a view and a table is that table can store data, whereas view can never store data. View is just a representative of an underlying SQL query. So every time you call a view, it internally just executes the underlying SQL query. Okay, now let's try to better understand this with some examples. So to explain the different concepts of view, I have created three different tables. So I have the customer table, product table, and the order table. Now the customer table, I'm calling it like TB underscore customer data. The product table, I'm calling it like TB underscore product info, and the order table, I'm calling it like TB underscore order details. Okay. Now in the customer table, as you can see, I have few information about the customer like customer ID, their name, their phone, their email, and their address. Okay. And then in the product table, I have information about the product ID, the product name, which brand they belong to, and their price. And finally, in the orders table, you can find information about the order ID and the product which was basically purchased from a particular order, and the quantity of that product, and the customer who purchased this order, and what was the discount that was given to him, and finally the date when this order actually got processed. Now, let's say you're working on a project where you are recording this information about the customers, products, and the different orders. And let's say your supervisor comes to you and tells you to generate a report to gather the order summary so that this can be shared with the clients or some vendors or some external parties who are not part of your organization, but you're basically working with them on some common projects. Okay, now when you have this kind of a requirement to gather the order summary, you first need to understand what is the data that you need to provide. So basically you will need to provide something like an order ID, the date when the order happened, what was the product that was purchased, who is the customer who purchased it, and finally what was the cost of it. Okay, so I have already written the query, so I'm not going to be writing this query in this video. Now I'll just quickly explain you what this query is doing. So I'm joining these three tables, the customer, order, and the product table, because all the information that I need to get the order summary is present in these three tables, and then I'm fetching all the required columns. So I'm fetching the order ID, the date, the product name, and the customer name, and finally I'm calculating the cost using this formula. Okay, now I'm not going to be explaining you this formula or how I have written this query, because this video is more about views and not about how I have written this query. Okay, so let me just execute this query just to see what is the order summary that we can get. And you can see that I'm getting the output now, and I think this output is pretty fine. Now let's say if your supervisor had told you that you just need to generate this report and then extract it into an Excel file or some sort of file and then share this file with your client or vendor or some external parties, then you could just share that file. But let's say your supervisor tells you that you need to basically give a code or an SQL query with which the client or the vendor or the external party can then use that query to execute it whenever they want and on any day they want. Okay, so let's say they have that kind of a requirement where the client wants to execute this report every single day and multiple times a day. Just they want to see what was the changes in the order summary that is happening every day or every few hours. So whenever you have this kind of a requirement, you basically will have two options. The first option is that you can just share the SQL query that you have just written and share it with your clients, vendors, or third external parties, right? But the problem with that approach is that you will basically be sharing all the confidential information, because you will be sharing the table names in your database, which you'd never want to do. So whenever you are working on a project, you would never want any external party or client or any vendors that you're working with to know what your internal database structure is or what is the logic that you have used to generate a report, or you do not want to share any confidential information, because when you share this query, the client or external parties would come to know about all these customer tables and all the other tables, and this customer table has some confidential information, like you can see that this customer table here has the phone number, their email ID, address, etc., and there can be many other confidential information as well which you do not want to share it with anyone outside your organization, right? So the first option is not fine. What would be the second option? The second option is that we can just create something called as a weave. Okay, now in order to create a weave, I can just use the command like create weave and give a name for that weave. The name can be anything, but it's always better to keep it meaningful. So since this is an order summary report, I'm just going to name the weave like order summary, and then you need to specify this clause, that is as. Okay, and then I can just run this whole command here. So if I run this, now you can see that the weave is created. So the weave is created with this name. Okay, so in order to execute this weave or see the result of that weave, I can just use the query like select star from this weave name, and now if I execute this query, you can see that I'm getting the data that basically I got from this query as well. So that is 12 records here. Okay, so what actually happened was SQL created a weave for this particular query, and then every time you execute or call this weave, internally it will just execute the query that was used to create this weave. Okay, so this exactly is what a weave does. You can see that we have basically used a query which we would generally use to query from a table, right? But in this case, order summary is not a table, it's a weave. Okay, so we can use a select statement to not only query the data from a table, but also we can query the data from a weave. But as I told you previously, weave is different from a table. Weave does not store data. So even though I have created this weave and I'm executing it like similar to a table, this order summary weave does not store any data. The only thing that it will store is the structure of this weave, and I'm going to talk about that in a short while. Okay, but what happens is every time I call this weave, internally SQL will just execute the query that was used to create that weave. So whether I'm executing this query here that you get the output here, or whether I'm executing this weave here, they basically are the same for SQL, because internally the execution of a weave will just execute the query that was used to create that weave. Okay, so you can say that weave basically does not improve any performance because it's exactly the same as executing the query. So if you call the weave 100 times, it's going to execute the query 100 times. Okay, but there is one type of weave which is called as a materialized weave, which can improve performance, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video. I'll be making a separate video about materialized weave. Okay, so now you understood how to create a weave. Now there is a lot more things that we can cover about creating a weave, and I'm going to explain that in a short while. But before that, I just want to answer some of the questions that you might have. Now, if I was in your place, I'd basically be thinking, how is actually weave useful? Or what is the actual purpose of using a weave, or what are its advantages? Because since I'm able to view the data from the view, I should also be able to see the query that was used to create this view, right? Because if I go to the left, if I go to my database, if I go to, yes, my database is demo here. If I go to the schema, that is public, if I go to the views, and if I right click on my view, and if I click script, and if I click create script, you can basically see the query that was used to create this view, right? In this case, how is it actually useful? Because whether I give my client the SQL query or whether I give him the view, he should still be able to see the SQL query that was used to create this view. So how is it actually useful? Now it's a valid question, but the thing is, when we want to have this kind of a requirement where we want to share a view or some data with our clients and we should give them access to execute a particular table or a view, what we generally do is we create a new user, okay, for that particular client or for the external party, whoever it is, and that user will only have specific access for the data that we want them to have access to. So let me explain that in more detail. But anyways, the thing that I'm going to explain here is basically explaining you what is the main purpose of using a view. I can think of a few different advantages, but mainly I would say that there are two main purposes of why we use views so widely in our projects. Okay, the first one is security, and the second one is to simplify complex SQL queries. Okay, so let's first look at the first one, that is the security, and this is exactly the question that I just mentioned now. Okay, whether you share an SQL query or whether you share a view, if you share a view, since I'm able to see the structure of the view in my database, the client should be able to see the structure of the view, right? But in reality, we do not share the database credentials with any external party. The database credentials are only for our team who are basically working on the project, right? To any third party vendors or anyone external to our project or to our company, we'll never share our database credentials with them. Okay, what we do is we create a user for the client, and then that user will only have access to specific database objects which we would like them to have access to. Okay, so let me try to give you an example. So I'm going to create a specific user for, let's say, some vendor, and let's say that vendor is called as James. Okay, so I'm just going to create a user, but in PostgreSQL, user is same as role. So I can either use create user and then username, or I can just mention create role and a username. So I'm just going to say James, and it's going to be a login role, and I'm going to give him a password, like, let's say, maybe I'll just keep it James for now. Okay, I'm just going to create this role. So if I execute this, you can see that the role is now created. Okay, so what this means is, instead of sharing my database credentials with my vendor, I'll just share the credentials of this role, that is James. So the role name is James, the password is James, the database is demo. So the vendor or any client that I have can access our database using this role. Okay, so let me try to do that. So I'm just going to open a new session here, and I'm going to connect to this new user. So I'm just going to say this is demo database, the user is James, and I'll click OK. And now if I try to execute, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to execute this view, that is select star from order summary, right? So if I execute this view, here the user is James, he's connecting to the database demo, but as the James user. Now if I execute this, you can see that I'm getting an error saying that permission denied for this view. So this is what I mean. What we have done is we have given access to our database demo to this vendor or to our external client, but we have created a separate role for him or a user for him. Okay, and what we will do is for this particular role, we'll only give him access to this particular view. So I'm just going to run a command like grant select on this view name, so that is order summary to James. Okay, that is my user or my role. So I'll just execute that. Now you can see the grant is successful. And now when James tries to log in and tries to execute this query, now he's able to see the data in this view. Okay, so what we have basically done is I've created a separate role, that is a separate user, and that user has only select access on this view. So he will only be able to view the data from this view. The client will not be able to see the SQL query that was used to create this view. Okay, so this is how we achieve security using views. Okay, so instead of sharing the entire SQL query, we just shared the view. We created a new role for that external user, and then we gave him only read access to that view. So he will not be able to see what was the SQL query used to create this view, but he'll only be able to see the data in that view. Okay, so this is the one of the main advantages of using a view. But of course, there are other advantages as well, and one of the other useful advantage of view is that we can use view to simplify complex SQL queries. Okay, now in this case, this query is not that complex, but let's say you had a query which was, let's say, 100 or 200 lines long, and it was very complex. There are a lot of logics that were written, multiple different tables used, etc. And let's say you have some business user who is part of your own organization and part of your own project, and he's a business user, so he's not technically that sound. And let's say he has a requirement where he wants to execute that query to view the report data. Okay, now if I try to give him this complex SQL query, it might actually scare him, because looking at this complex SQL query, he might not be very confident to execute it. But rather, if I just create a view over that 200 lines of complex SQL query and just give him that view where he just has to execute, like select star from that view name, it will be much easier for him to use it, right? And not just this, but let's say I have some complex SQL query which I keep on executing multiple times. Let's say I'm doing some data analysis or some testing or some development where I have a piece of SQL query which I need to execute multiple different times. So I need to rewrite it several different times, on maybe in today and maybe after few days, etc. Right? What I can just do is, instead of rewriting the entire complex query multiple different times, I can just create a view over that complex SQL query and then use this view multiple times whenever I want. So it's kind of saving that SQL query as a view so that I can use it multiple times instead of rewriting that query. So this is the second main advantage. We can simplify a complex SQL query by using a view. I hope now you understand how to create a view, which was very simple, but more importantly, what is the main purpose of using a view? Okay, now let's talk about how to create view in few different ways and how to modify a view. Okay, now to explain that, what I'm going to do is I'll just remove all of this. We don't need this, but we'll still need this query that I have created. Okay, so I have created this view here by using the create view command, but let's say if I wanted to re-execute this view, and if I execute this, you can see that I'm getting an error saying that relation order summary already exists. But I have another command here called as create or replace. Okay, now create or replace is also basically creating a view, but there is a slight difference. So let's look at that. But before that, let me just execute this. Now you can see that I'm not getting any error, and I can execute this as many times as I want and it will work absolutely fine. So what exactly is happening is, when I do a create or replace, SQL will check if the view is not present. If the view is not present, then it's going to create this view. But if, let's say, if the view is already present, then it's just going to replace that view with whatever you have provided newly. Okay, but there are certain rules. The rules are that whenever you're using a create or replace, basically you cannot change the order of the column, you cannot change the column data type, you cannot change the column names. Okay, now let's try to understand this with some examples. Okay, so let's say I have this date column here, right? And I want to change this column name from date to, let's say, maybe order date. Okay, and if I run this query, this will basically work fine, and it's showing me this new column name, that is order date. But let's say if I run this create or replace view, now it's going to throw me an error saying that cannot change name of view column date to order date. So this is the first thing that you need to remember. Whenever you're using a create or a replace, you cannot change the column name of the existing view. Okay, so if a view is already created, then whatever column name that you have used, you should still use the same column name. Now there is a different way to do that. I'm going to talk about that in a short while, but for now, remember that when you're using create or replace, you should still follow the same column name that was used when creating the original view. Okay, now secondly, so let me remove this column name. So this is the first thing. Okay, the second thing is I cannot change the data type. So let's say I have this order ID column and I know that this is an integer. So if I execute this query, you can see that it is okay, this is a big int. Okay, now let's say I want to change this data type to something else. Maybe I will make it like varchar. So if I just execute this query, it works absolutely fine. But let's say if I execute this view, now it's going to throw me an error saying that cannot change data type of the view order ID from big int to character varying. Okay, so we cannot change the data type. That's the second thing that you need to remember. The third thing is, as I told you, we cannot change the order of the column. So let's say I want to add a column here, that is c dot cust ID. So I'm adding a column in between because I have totally 5 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this was the fifth column, that is cost. Now in the fifth column's place, I have put cust ID. Okay. Now if I try to run this view, it's going to throw me an error saying that cannot change the name of view column cost to cust ID. So Weave already knows that the fifth column name was cost, but now what I have done is the fifth column name I have made it like cust ID, and that is why it's throwing an error. Okay, so I cannot add a new column in between any of the existing columns, but I can add this new column to the end of the column list. So if I add it to the end, and now if I try to run this, now it will work absolutely fine. Okay, so I cannot change the order of the column. So whatever the columns were already defined during the creation of the view, that has to exist in the same order, but at the end I can add new columns. So let's say if I just execute this statement here, so I'm just going to say select star from this, and if I run this, now you can see that the new column cust ID has come up here. Okay, so I can add new columns at the end, but I just cannot add new columns in between. Okay, so these are the certain things that you need to remember. And why this happens is because when you create a view, I told you that view does not store data, but view will store the structure of your query. So when I say structure of the query, it basically associates with what you have mentioned in your select clause. So the list of columns, the data type of each of these columns, and the column names. Okay, so this structure is stored by the view, and that is what the view will be associating it to. Okay, so every time you do a create or replace, it's going to match if the existing structure and the structure that you're trying to give newly using the create or replace, is it in sync. If it is not in sync, then that is when it's going to throw an error. You can add new columns at the end, but other than that, you cannot basically change anything else. But you can of course change anything in the join condition. So I can add new columns, I can add order by, I can remove a join table, etc. All that is fine. Just that the structure should not change. The structure has to be the same when you're using create or replace. Okay, so I hope this is clear how to use create or replace. But let's say you still wanted to change the structure. Okay, so for example, I wanted to change this column from date to order date just to make it more meaningful. Now I can still change the structure of a view, just that I cannot do that using create or replace. Okay, in order to change the structure of the view, I just need to use the command like alter view. Okay, so similar to a table, I can just say alter view and the view name, that is order summary, and then I can say alter view name, rename column, and the column name which is date to, I can just say the new column name which is order date. Okay, now if I execute this, the alter view is successful, and now if I execute this view, you can see that now this view is getting the new column name, that is order date. But one thing that you need to remember is this alter view only altered the column name of the view but not of the underlying table. Okay, so let's say if I look at the table itself, so this order was coming from the order table. If I look at this table, this column will still be called as date. So this is one thing that you need to remember. So similarly, I can also rename the view. So let's say if I wanted to rename the view, I can again use the same alter view command. So I can say alter view, and that is my view name. Okay, not this, but order summary. I can say rename to some, let's say order summary underscore 2, and if I execute this, you can see that the rename is successful. And now if I execute select star from order summary, it does not exist because I renamed this view to order summary underscore 2, and now if I execute this, it's present here. So I can rename the view, I can rename the column of the view by using the alter commands. I cannot just change the structure of the view by using create or replace. Okay, I hope all of this is clear. Now similarly, as you might have already guessed, if I wanted to remove this view or drop this view completely from the database, then I can use the command drop view and the view name. Okay, that is order summary. If I do this, okay, order summary, I already renamed it to underscore 2, so I'm just going to drop view order summary underscore 2, and now you can see the drop is successful. Okay, so this is basically how you can modify a view. We have also seen how to create a view and how to create a view using create or replace, and how to alter a view, etc. Okay, and finally also how to drop a view. I hope all of this was clear. Now there is one more thing that I want to talk about here, is that a view does not automatically capture the change in a table structure. Okay, so for example, let's say you wanted to create a view where you want to only capture the most expensive products. Okay, so let's say I'm just going to do select star from tb underscore products or product underscore info, right? So what is the table name here? Product info. Okay, and here I'm just going to say where price is greater than 1000. So I'm just going to capture, okay, 1000. I'm just going to capture those products who are expensive, and I'm terming expensive when the price is greater than 1000. Okay, and I'm going to create a view for this. So I'm just going to say create view. Okay, and I'm just going to name it like, let's say, expensive products. Okay, something like this. Okay, and I'll use the as clause. And now if I run this, the view is created. And now if I just select from this view, so I'm just going to select star from this view, it's going to only show me those two products who are expensive, that is whose price is greater than 1000. And one thing that you need to remember here is that I created this view by using the star command in my select clause. So meaning that all the columns from this table would be selected. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, let me change the structure of this underlying table. So that is, let me add a new column. Okay, so I'm just going to say alter table, and this table, that is TB product info, and I'm going to say add column name. So let me add maybe prod configuration. Okay, I'll just say prod config, and this will be varchar, and I'm going to say maybe 100. Okay, and if I execute this, the table is now altered. Okay, so let's say if I just query from this table, that is tb underscore product info. Okay, so when I do a select star from tb product info, you can see that I have a new column added here. Okay, and now when I execute this view, okay, that is the expensive products, this was a view that I just created here, right? And I told you that whenever we execute a view, internally it will just execute the query. Now when I execute this view, it should basically internally execute the query, that is this one, that is select star from tb product info where price greater than 1000. Okay, but the thing is, I told you that a view, when it is created, it will store the structure of that view, right? It does not store the data, but it stores the structure. So when the view is initially created, it had stored the structure, and that structure only had these first four columns. This new column was not present in the initial structure. So when I do a select star from this view, that is expensive products, you can see that it's not showcasing the new column that was added in the TB product info table. Okay, so this is an important thing that you need to remember, and this can actually be a tricky question that will be asked in interviews. Okay, I was asked about it, and that is why I'm sharing this. So the reason why this is happening is the structure of the view was already stored. So the list of columns, the column name, the data type, everything is already stored. Now, if I wanted to change the structure of that view, or basically update the structure of that view, then I will basically need to recreate that view, or basically refresh that view. In order to refresh that view, I can just say create or replace that view. And now if I try to run this view, now the view is recreated. And now if I do a select star from that view name, now this new column will show up. Okay, so this is one thing that you need to remember, but this is only when you add a new column, or basically change the structure of the table, right? But let's say if you add a new record. So for example, let's say if I do insert into this table, that is TB product info, I'm going to say my new column would be values here. My product would be, let's say, P10. Okay, and maybe a new product, maybe I'll just tell it like test. Okay, and maybe it's a brand also, I will name it like test, and let's say the price is maybe 200. Okay, or maybe not 200, I'll say 1200. Okay, and my last column, that is prod config, will be null. Okay, if I do an insert here, now the data is inserted, so that in my table, that is TB product info, you can see I have this record P10 that is newly added, the test product. Okay, and if I go to my view, you will still see the data in this view. Okay, so the thing that you need to remember is, we will always showcase you the latest data. Okay, because every time you execute a view, it will execute the query. Whatever data is changed or updated or newly added or deleted or whatever, the latest data will show from the view. But when it comes to the table structure, it may not show the latest table structure, because you will need to refresh the view for it to show the latest table structure. Okay, so this is a couple of things that you need to remember. Okay, so I hope this was clear. Now the last part that I want to cover in this video is about updatable views. Okay, so how to create a view that can be updated, and what are the different rules that you need to follow if you want to make a view to be updatable. Now, to be frank, right, this is not recommended. Like, if you want to update a table, you should not be doing it through a view, but there can be some scenarios where you may want to update a table through a view, maybe not you as a developer, but maybe from some external system or some application that you have written. There can be such cases, and that is why such feature is still enabled in almost all of the databases. Okay, now let's see what are the views that can be updatable. Now there can be many rules, but I'm mainly going to be talking about the 5 most important rules that you need to follow if you want to make a view to be updatable. Okay, so the first thing is that you can only update those views which are created using one table. Okay, so the view should be created using one table or view only. Okay, so if you have multiple table joins in your query and you created a view using that, then you will not be able to update that view. Okay, so for example, let's use the expensive product view that we just created above. Okay, so I have this view and you can see that. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this whole thing here, and you can see that I created this view, that is the expensive product, which is basically created from just one table. It has some where condition, etc. Right? If I do a select star from that view, you can see I'm getting the data. Okay. Now let's say if I wanted to update this view, so I can just say update, and I'll just copy this view name, that is this one, and let's say I'm just going to change its product name. Okay, so I'm just going to say prod name equal to, let me give some meaningful name. So I'm just going to say AirPods Pro. Okay, and I also change the brand name, so I'm just going to say brand equal to maybe Apple. Okay, and then I'll say this is where my prod ID equal to P10. Right, so what I'm trying to do is I want to just update this record P10. Okay, I want to just give some meaningful name here. Okay, and if I just execute this, you can see that the update is successful. If I do a select star from that view, that is expensive products, you can now see that the name is updated to AirPods Pro and the brand is Apple. Okay, and now similarly, if I just look at the underlying table, okay, the underlying table, this view was created using this TB products info, right? So if I just do a select star from TB products info, you can now see that I have this P10 product and its product name and brand have been updated. So I did not update the table directly, I just updated the view, but this view was created from this table. Okay, and the table internally got updated. So if I had created a view just by using one table, like a simple SQL query that is like this, then such views are updatable. Okay, but for example, let's say I have this another view that I created at the top, right? That is this one, the order summary, which I created this view using a query which was having 3 different tables. Right, now let me try to update this query and let's see what happens. So if I run similar update statement here, so I'm just going to say update order summary. I'm going to say, okay, what does this order summary have? So I'll just do a select star from order summary, and okay, it has this many columns. So let's try to update some columns. So let's say set maybe cost equal to, let's say 10. Okay, where I'm just going to say ord id equal to 1. Okay, if I do an update here, now it's going to throw me an error, and error says cannot update view order summary. Views that do not select from a single table or view are not automatically updated. Okay, so this is what I meant. If you have created a view with more than one table or more than one view, then such views cannot be updated. Okay, here one thing you need to remember is that we can create a view over a view as well. Okay, but if you want to make it updatable, then that query that you have used to create the view, it should only have either one table or one view. Okay, if it has more than one table or more than one view, then such views cannot be updated. Okay, so this is the rule number 1 that you need to remember in order to make your view, if you want to make your view updatable. Now the second thing that you need to remember is that the query that you have used to create your view cannot have distinct clause. Okay, so cannot have distinct clause. Okay, so let's try to see this also with an example. So let's say I have this particular view, right? So again, I'm just going to copy that here. I'm just going to paste it here. Okay, so maybe I'll just move this next. What I'm trying to do is I'm again going to be using the same view, but here instead of just select star, I'm just going to use distinct. Okay, and now I'll create this view. The view is created successfully, and you can see I have the data here. Now let me try to do a same update here. Okay, similar update. So I'm just going to say this one, and maybe I'll update this Pro to maybe Pro 2, and everything else can stay as it is. Now if I try to do an update here, now you can see I'm getting an error saying that views containing distincts are not automatically updatable. Okay, now there is a different way we can update it using instead of, but I'm not going to be covering that in this video. Okay, but yes, this is what I meant. If your view is using a distinct clause, then such views cannot be updated. Okay, so this is the second rule. Now similarly, the third rule, maybe some of you guys might have already guessed, is that group by also does not work. Okay, so basically if query contains group by, then cannot update such views. Okay, so for example, let's say I'm going to create a new view for this. Okay, so let's say I wanted to write a query where it will tell me how many orders have been sold per day. Okay, so something like that. So I'm just going to say my order table, that is tb underscore order details, right? And here I'm just going to say my order ID, and I'm just going to say count of 1 to count how many orders have been, okay, not order ID, maybe the date, right? How many orders have been sold per day. I'm going to name this like, let's say, number of orders, and since I'm using a count, I'll use a group by here, so I'm just going to say group by date. Okay, so if I run this query, okay, you can see that for each day how many orders have been sold. I can see it here. Now I'm going to create a view for this. I'm just going to say create view, and I'll say maybe order count, okay, as, and that should be fine. So I'll create a view. The view is created. Now if I just execute this view, select star from this, you can see that I'm getting the data in this view. But let's say if I want to update this view, okay, so I'm just going to say update order count, set maybe number of order equal to, let's say, 0. Okay, where I'll say date equal to, maybe I'll just copy this date, that is 2020 06, okay, 06 and 01. Okay, now if I try to run this, you can see that I'm again getting an error saying that views containing group by are not automatically updated. Okay, so this were the third rule. So you cannot use distinct, you cannot use group by, and you cannot have more than one table. So if you have any of those, then such views cannot be updatable. And I'm going to also mention you the fourth and the fifth rule. So if query contains with clause, then cannot update such views. Okay, this is the fourth rule. And the fifth one, I would say that if a query contains window functions, then cannot update such views. Okay, so I'm not going to be giving you example for with clause and window functions, because I think you get the idea, right? If your query is using any of this, so whether it's having more than one table, or whether it's having a distinct clause, whether it's having a group by clause, or whether it's using a with clause, or whether it's using a window function, you cannot update such views. So you can still create views with all of this, but just that the view cannot be updated. I hope this is clear. Now the last thing that I want to cover in this video is, that is also part of this updatable view, is the clause called as with check. Okay, with check option. Okay, now let's talk about with check option. It can be pretty useful in some specific scenarios. Now let's say you have a supplier who is basically providing you all the products, okay, and let's say there is a supplier who provides you the Apple products, okay, and he wants to see all the list of Apple products that you have, and he would like to make some updates if required. Okay, so let's say, how do you fetch all the Apple products from your products table? I can just say select star from tb product info, where I can just say brand, right, brand equal to Apple. Now if I just run this, you can see that I'm only going to get those products who belongs to the brand Apple. Okay, and there are three products as of now. Now I'm going to create a view for this. I'm just going to say create view, and I'm going to name it like, let's say, Apple products. Okay, so this is my view name, and I'm going to create it, and I'm going to give this view to my supplier who is dealing with Apple products. Okay, and let's say he wants to do some update. So let's say he wanted to create a new product, or basically he's going to supply you a new product, and he wants to add this new product into this view. Okay, so let's say he will do a new insert. So I'm just going to say insert into this view, and here he's going to add, let's say, value, and he's going to add all the values. Now remember that this is a simple SQL query, so it's just having one table. There is no distinct, there is no group by, there is no window function, there is no with clause. So this view can be updated, right? So that is why he's going to do an insert here. So let's say what are the different columns available here. So we have the product ID. So let's say he's going to name it like maybe P20. Okay, and then he's going to have a product name. So let's say the product name would be, by mistake, instead of adding a Apple product, let's say he added some other product, okay, maybe belonging to some other brand. Okay, so let's say he's adding Note 20, okay, some phone which is belonging to Samsung brand. So he's going to add the brand as Samsung, and let's say the price would be maybe 2500, okay, just example. And then let's say the product category, he'll keep it like null, okay, and he'll do an insert. Now, okay, I'm getting some error. What is that? Okay, it should be values. Okay, so let me run this now. Now you can see that the insert has worked fine. And let me do a query from this view. Okay, so let's do a select star from this Apple products view, and also select star from the products table itself. So first let me show you the data in the products table. Now in the products table, you can see that this new record P20 has been added, that is Note 20 Samsung. But the thing is, this P20 record was added by that Apple seller that we had, okay, or the reseller that we had. So if I look at this view, that is the Apple products, this does not have that record. So basically what happened was, you created a view that is Apple products with an intention that this will only be used by the Apple seller, the supplier who is basically giving you the Apple products, and he can have access to all this data that belongs to the Apple brand, right? But what he did was, by mistake or intentionally or whatever, he did some, or basically he added a data that did not belong to his product, that did not belong to him, okay, because he added a product belonging to Samsung into this table, okay, which is actually, technically it worked fine, but it's actually wrong. We should never have given him access to add any data other than Apple, right? Because he was an Apple supplier, so he should only have access to modify or update or add data or remove data which belong to the Apple brand. But since we did not have any checks in our view, he was able to basically add data that did not belong to Apple as well. Now, whenever you want to avoid this kind of issues, we have a check called as, or a special clause called as with check option. So when I'm creating a view, I can give this option, that is with check option, at the end of my view, and then I can create my view. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say create or replace view, and I'm going to recreate this view now. Okay, so everything is still the same. Only thing that I changed was I added this clause here with check option. Now what this will do is, once you created a view with this option, whenever someone is trying to do an insert into this view, okay, it will check if whatever data is getting inserted, it is satisfying this where condition. In this case, the where condition states that the brand equal to Apple. So only insert statements where the brand will be Apple, only those insert statements will be successful. If you try to insert any record where it belongs to any other brand, then such insert statements will throw an error. Okay, so let's see. Now we'll try to use the same insert statement here. Instead of P20, let's say I'm going to create P22. Okay, and let's say it's Note 22 only, and the same thing Samsung, or maybe let's say I'll make it Note 22 and everything is the same. Now when I try to do an insert, now you can see that SQL is not allowing that to happen because it's throwing an error saying that new row violates check option. Okay, so this was a check option that worked in this particular case. So this will kind of do a check such that wrong data does not get inserted into our view. Okay, and that is why we use check option. But let's say instead of this Note 22, I will insert something like, maybe let's say MacBook Air, and this belongs to the Apple brand. Okay, and now if I try to insert into this table, now it works fine. Okay, so the thing was, with this check option, it's like an additional verification or a check that we add to our view. Whenever someone tries to insert, only those records will get inserted which will satisfy the where condition. Okay, so this is what a with check option does. Okay, so hopefully this was clear, and I think with this we have basically covered everything that you needed to know about views. The only thing that I missed was the materialized view, which I will be covering in a separate video. Okay, now if you like this video and if you found some value from this video, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel. And if you have any feedback, definitely leave them in the comments below, because I definitely like reading your comments. And thank you so much for all the support, and see you soon in the next one. Bye.